following the ConCourt upholding the Supreme Court of Appeal's ruling of former President Jacob Zuma's medical parole as invalid. The Department of Justice and Correctional Services Commissioner is now left with the task of finding a resolution on whether Zuma goes back to prison or not. Different discourses have emerged around what repercussions that decision may bring. Reports by several Sunday newspapers are suggesting that there are threats of instability should the former leader go back to prison. Now, speaking at the Operation Shanela yesterday, Police Minister Bheki Cele says they'll have to wait on the directive of the Correctional Services and on the matter and also execute whichever order given. Let's take a listen.
The ConCourt judgment, we are waiting for its outcome. I've been in contact with the Minister of Justice, who also happens to be the Minister of Correctional Services, since yesterday and this morning. The ConCourt gave the prerogative on them, the acting National Commissioner of Correctional Services, to take a decision on the matter. We are still waiting for that decision. I spoke to the minister yesterday. I spoke to the minister this morning. They say their legal team is still trying to interpret what is supposed to happen. For us, as the National Commissioner said, we are getting ready for whatever eventuality, which could be to say they take them back in prison, to say he has finished his sentence. Is up to them.
Right, let's now unpack the possible repercussions of either action with political analyst, Professor Sethulego Matebesi. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. Police Minister Bheki Cele is saying that they await whatever eventuality. I mean, it appears as though the former president's times of liberty may be over or coming to an end at least. What do you make of this?
Good morning, Mpho, and good morning to your viewers. I want to take a different approach here, and I want to start off with the former President Jacob Zuma himself. He made a contribution to the political landscape in South Africa. There might be South Africans and somewhere in the world who didn't like what he did, but fact of the matter is, he is regarded as a political elder who made a contribution to what South Africa is today. And I just wish and hope those around President Jacob Zuma will start to advise him not to tone down, because we don't want to determine the narrative and the modus operandi of politicians and our public servants. But fact of the matter is, he made a significant contribution to South Africa. Whatever way we may interpret that. And I think for me, it will be a sad moment in the history of South Africa if he has to go down with that, with many other things that. But coming back to that, we need to be very cautious around this issue. Fact of the matter is, if South Africa has to uphold the rule of law, then it had to apply to everyone, irrespective of who that particular person is. But I thought by this time, we should have laid to bed this Jacob Zuma matter. And it's really unfortunate that we're still facing a situation like this.
Yeah, because the timing of that ConCourt ruling, at least from one perspective, is indeed unfortunate, because it's 2 years to the week, I mean, since the original ruling that Zuma be sent to prison. And of course, you know, he may have contributed significantly to South Africa, but defying the Zondo Commission, of course, is a different matter. Papers are reporting of possible instability should he be arrested. What do you think may happen in this regard? You know, is it possible that we may face another unrest? Although Police Minister Bheki Cele is saying that they have no fears around the sympathizers. They will ensure that they abide by the rule of law.
Well, that is the right approach. That is what you want to hear from a police minister. But you don't want to hear these kinds of pronouncements. You want to see action, and you want to see action being taken consistently. South Africa is a crime haven, and I state that without a shred of doubt. It's really unacceptable how South Africans have to go out and protect themselves. But coming back to the Jacob Zuma issue, you know, it's not easy. We may think that it's very easy for the Minister of Police himself and even Minister Ronald Ramola to take a decision around that. But fact of the matter is, this is not a partisan, this is not a party political issue. It is a matter of national significance and interest, and that is why they need to put the interest of South Africans at heart here. And as I've indicated, the possibility of violence and what we have experienced will forever be there. There might be sporadic attempts to emulate what happened in July last year, a couple of years ago, last year. But fact of the matter is, I think our residents in these particular provinces that took part in those protests might just also be aware about the negative consequences, outcome of such protests. And we've seen many people have lost their life, and you will never know whether you will also lose your life if you're going to be part of that. But we know Jacob Zuma has ardent supporters, and I will not be surprised if there won't be further attempts to try and bring social disruption in perhaps in KwaZulu-Natal, Durban once again, and other parts of the country.
Now, Professor, as we try and make sense of what exactly is happening, I mean, police are investigating all sorts of angles. Arrests have since been made. Of course, there are some suggestions around the link between former President Jacob Zuma and the truck burnings that we've seen of late. And, of course, all of that will come down to a thorough investigation and, of course, what will transpire as those who've been arrested get to court. But what do you think police and the intelligence should be focusing on at this very moment, especially looking back at some of the lessons of July 2021?
No, we don't learn our lessons. I often say we do have capable state institutions. And the question is, I don't know what our intelligence services are doing. Why can't they pick up on some of these issues that we see happening in South Africa? I mean, we are proactively working against our own country in terms of how we market our country. And it is definitely not good. I mean, if we move away from the Jacob Zuma and you now on the truck issue, and many other issues where you thought that perhaps the police should have known about that. Perhaps they did know, but didn't act on the information. And it's sometimes very difficult even for the police. You may have 30,000 police in an area. They would still be very difficult to prevent a crime up until it happened. But fact of the matter is, we want to see action being taken. And we've seen with numerous cases in South Africa where it seems as if there's a vicious cycle of pronouncements being made about being firm, and at the end of the day, nothing happens. And I think that has emboldened criminal elements in South Africa, including what we've seen recently with the truck burnings and all that in the country.
Police are ready to take former President Jacob Zuma back to prison if they're instructed to do so, despite the threat of violence from sympathizers. We know that he is receiving medical attention in Russia. Of course, that's what we're being told. What do you think is the likelihood of his return, and some of the very important considerations that need to be made ahead of this? Should the police minister be given instruction to ensure that he's returned back to South Africa?
Well, it's going to be very difficult to predict how the former president's team will respond and what their strategy will be. But one thing that perhaps history has given us a glimpse of the former president is that he is very brave. His family is in South Africa, and I can't see that he won't return to South Africa. any soon, because that in itself will lead to other complications. And are we now going to say that he will stay outside of the country for the rest of his life? I don't think the Jacob Zuma that the public have come to know will remain in Russia based on the outcome of this judge, or based on the constitutional judgment. I definitely foresee that he will return to South Africa. And his legal team, I don't know what further recourse do they have, because that is not my area. But fact of the matter is, this judgment will have huge implications for the social fabric of South Africa. Either way, there will be a lot of debates. And remember, we are on the eve of yet another hotly contested elections coming up. And it will be very interesting to see how such a judgment and what eventually, how police will react, and the decision that will be taken by the Correctional Services, how that will impact not only on the politics in general in South Africa, but also with, on the internal dynamics within the African National Congress. We've seen on numerous occasions how such decisions, which perhaps have nothing to do with the current president, ultimately finds a way where the president will now be blamed for not being sympathetic for a former comrade.
Because, I mean, it's interesting you say that. Other figures, the likes of EFF leader Julius Malema, ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula, have said that they personally wouldn't want to see the former president going back to jail. I suppose it then brings about a conflict between a moral compass versus the rule of law.
Yes, it's even more concerning if such leaders are making such statements. We all, I mean, as I've indicated during my open statement, Jacob Zuma is an elderly, and no one would want to see that. But we also have to be very careful, because tomorrow Prof Sethulego will be in the same situation. Sorry for making an example with you or Matebesi. And the question is, am I going to be treated on the basis of my status? And that is what South Africans don't need at this stage. So it is a very difficult situation. And we had to be cautious. The pronouncements that we make, especially coming from such leaders who, at the end of the day, need to consolidate the rule of law, and they need to uphold it. But I do understand where they come from, because that is also my feeling. But at the end of the day, we also need to respect the rule of law in South Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you and I speak, Professor, looking at the city press, it says here, burning trucks, the Zuma link, speaking about a confidential report that's named xenophobic supporters of former President Jacob Zuma as instigators of the truck torchings in a number of provinces this week. What do you think are some of the really important questions that need to be asked around this? Because another paper, the Sunday World, is saying that taxi bosses and community members at Nkandla say that there will be blood if the Department of Correctional Services sends the former president to jail. And government says there will be no repeat of the July unrest, as Msholozi has lost support from former sympathizers. I mean, looking at some of these scenarios, especially looking at the support of the former president, what is your take? What do you make of this?
No, we are in for a very rough times. You know, if you have not dealt with some of the conflict issues in the past, then they are bound to repeat themselves. And I will not be surprised, and as sad as it is, to see a repeat of what happened last year. Remember, you need two people, one individual who have criminal intent to cause destruction. And we will never encourage South Africans to go that route when they've got issues. But we've seen it numerous times where people aligned to certain political figures, certain public figures, will even give up whatever they have achieved in life. And such pronouncements from an industry which we know has been very violent prone, the taxi industry, should be taken seriously. And I just hope the police will be proactive this time, but I can't see how they will prevent this. They failed in the past. They failed numerous occasions, and I can't see that the police, even if they can deploy the South African Defence Force, that they will be able to deal with the situation. We may just see sporadic outbreaks of violence yet again, and one life lost in South Africa yet again in the name of the former president. I think that will be a black spot in the history of South Africa yet again.
Very well. Perhaps let's leave it there for now, and thank you for your time and analysis. Political analyst, Professor Sethulego Matebesi.